everyone, thank you for tuning in to what will hopefully be the first of many Hireup Sessions. Tonight we're going to be talking about finding and managing healthy and really sustainable and effective support relationships. And I'm really excited to be joined by some of our most experienced community members tonight. So we might get straight into a bit of an introduction from each of you. So Mel, I understand that you have 12 support workers and soon to be 13. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your support team and the types of supports that you access through Hireup?
Yeah, so I joined Hireup in 2016. As Sarah said, I have a team of 12, now 13 support workers, but the latest support worker I just inducted yesterday.
Almost a full-time job.
It is. Managed to come out of paid. So I have an amazing team who helps me with personal care and respite, which it's basically just out and about in our community. I study and I work, so I'm always out and about. So it's amazing to have a team.
And you have different workers who are sort of best suited for different types of support as well, is that right?
Yeah, I think once you work with the workers for a while, you kind of see the areas of interest and also the areas of strengths and which area they prefer to be in, and I just kind of try and match that to help make things a bit easier.
Perfect. And Pam, you are an account manager for your daughter Brianna, and you were one of the first people or duos to be on Hireup. So tell us a little bit about the types of support that you access and what your experience has been with Hireup thus far.
Yes, we started in early 2015 when Hireup went live. I manage with and in conjunction with my daughter the supports that she needs. She has different supports for different days and different types of activities that she needs. And as Mel said, you try to match the support needs with the particular support worker. So we have two regular weekly long day carers who we selected with a priority on what they could bring to Bree in terms of what she does on those particular days. So the selection process, I guess, is something that we think about very carefully when we put a job up on the job board on Hireup. So, for example, one of the days, Bree, my daughter, does ceramics at a ceramic studio. She has a little business going.
I've seen ceramics. We're just talking about me purchasing
and
some.
She's on Facebook.
Throw up a link up. Some PNR.
So the priority for that day was obviously someone who not necessarily had experience in ceramics, but certainly was a bit arty crafty, can appreciate the aesthetics of what she's trying to do, because she can't always physically manage completely to do what she's trying to do. So so that was a very specific skill or skill set that we tried to match up for her. Similarly with the Thursday, she goes to the gym and then she does a Zumba class.
That sounds like a fantastic.
She's got such a great life. So she wanted someone, a bit sporty, someone who's used to going to the gym, who can help her with the things that she found challenging. So and then the Zumba, obviously someone who physically wanted to join in. She didn't want to have a carer just take her there and sit. She wanted someone who could get up,
be a part of it.
Yeah, be a part of it. So that was because you can't necessarily find someone, the ideal person that has all these different interests and skill sets.
And nor would you want to spend all of your time with one That's
Well, that's
amazing.
right. It's an
important to have.
opportunity to sort of spread your wings and, you know,
Exactly.
develop your network.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we might deep dive into some of the ways that, you know, people are connecting with support workers in a little bit. But Pat, I'd love for you to introduce yourself as the representative of all of the support workers
all the support workers on
on
the platform.
Hireup.
No pressure, Pat.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah, so I became a support worker with Hireup at the start of 2017, while I was at uni actually and studying, and a friend had kind of put me onto it, and I'd had a little bit of sporadic experience in the disability sector and sort of always loved kind of getting involved in with people in the community. So as soon as I started, it was just so awesome to be able to link up with people and basically just get to know them, have a chat about, okay, well, what do you like doing in your free time, and what are you looking for, and what are your interests, and how can I best help you achieve whatever it is that your goals are. And yeah, I kind of haven't sort of looked back. And now I'm, you know, out of uni, currently working full time and still kind of fitting in some support work around it with some of the people that I've met, because I just can't get enough of it. So,
and you've got 4 people at the moment? that
Yeah, so 4 people. It's probably I work most regularly with one person every week, and then the other people I sort of start here and there on weekends mostly and evenings. Just to fit around full-time work. Yes, that's great.
Great. Well, I guess we're probably all agreed that one of the key pieces in being able to really build sustainable and have really effective support relationships is being able to pick the right person. And I think all 3 of you have alluded to the fact that Hireup gives you that choice to be able to connect with people based on interest and based on experience and all of those different sorts of things. So Mel, question for you with that in mind, thinking about a Hireup support worker profile, obviously that's the first point of contact that we have with people in terms of trying to get a sense of their personality and whether they would be the right fit. So what do you look for in a support worker profile?
To me, I think so far I've been looking for support workers who are just fun and friendly. I mean, the experience is not necessarily the make it or break it point. It's definitely a bonus to have experience and familiar with the areas of support that I'm looking for. But I've had a lot of the workers on my team who are quite new to the industry and don't really know, or are not that familiar with the areas of support that I'm asking for. But and yeah, as long as they're willing to learn, they're willing to try new things, and yeah, that's just how they being a team.
Yeah, fantastic. So I guess having a really kind of detailed profile in terms of people's interests and hobbies and all of those sorts of things helps you to make that decision and get a little glimpse into their personality.
Yeah, and it's a lot of it's just around, I think, connecting on a human level and not so much on a clinical level in terms of it's not always just about what kind of support do I need, how often do I need it, how does it need to be done, but it's also me as a person and the support worker, what common interests do we have? And if we're able to get along, and what can we talk about that makes us not just as a worker and a user, but also as a friend.
As friends. And a great selfie always
Yes,
helps.
always helps.
Always helps.
Definitely.
And Pat, on the flip side, when you're looking at the profiles of people who are seeking support, what are some of the things that are of real interest to you? What things kind of attract you and go, hey, I'd really like to reach out to that person?
Not to kind of repeat everything that Mel said, but I think, yeah, I think it's just especially harping on that note about what I just love to see people that put, a paragraph or 2. I know it sounds a bit mediocre, but just putting in, not being afraid to share a little bit about yourself and say, this is me, this is what I like doing. And it sounds kind of a bit corny when you're just talking about it now, but when you're reading it, it is something that, I like to see someone. It's not so much the specific interest, but I like to see someone who's open and sharing stuff about themselves, which just, it tells me that they're going to be willing to have a chat and kind of feel whether we're compatible for each other on that kind of personability level, which, and that for me as a support worker is probably the biggest part of those sort of working relationships, is establishing that really solid foundation of kind of that compatibility and that personality connection.
Absolutely. And I think then, once we've been able to create a really great profile, we've got a sense as to whether people would be the right fit for us. The next step is making that initial, reach out and saying, hey, I would like to work with you. And there's kind of two ways that people can go about doing that. And I'm sure that all of you have tried different ways of reaching out, whether it be the messaging feature, whether it be the jobs board, or Mel, whether it be bringing on board your own support workers. So I'd like to kind of explore each of those and get your insights on each of those three areas. So the first way that we really encourage people to connect is through the jobs board. And I don't know if all of you have used the jobs board feature previously, but what that does is just allow people to send a message out and say, hey, this is what I'm looking for, or this is the type of person that I'm looking for, whether you have an idea of the specifics of that shift or whether you are just looking for someone who loves the same things or someone who's into arts and craft and those sorts of things. So I guess a question back to you, Pat, is in Sydney there's obviously a lot of support shifts that are coming through all of the time. The demand is really high, and people are posting a lot of jobs, not just for one shift, but maybe for a whole host of different types of support. So what would be your one tip to someone posting a job to get the interest and to attract the right type of support workers? What would make their job stand out?
I think probably it'd be two things, because you're right, like you do when you are looking for ongoing work, you do get lots of email notifications. I'm sure all support workers listening will know what I'm talking about. But I think it sounds, again, a bit sort of lame, but that kind of creativity with the job. So instead of saying transport, in one word, kind of saying, road trip to the appointment or something, or like a medical appointment or something like that. I know it sounds really like lame, but it is kind of, then you kind of feel that enthusiasm to want to reach out. And that's the second thing, is that enthusiasm in the job board. It makes you kind of feel like, they really are looking for someone to, help them out here and to support them, and how can I sort of reach out with them? And then that leads on to looking at their profile and seeing how you can sort of connect with them, I think. So that's probably the biggest thing, is that enthusiasm and creativity.
Yeah, absolutely. And Pam, in the job post that you have done to connect with support workers for free, what have you found that's worked really well for you?
I think Pat hit it, in a nutshell, really, trying to make it, trying to put some personality out there, trying to not just be a list of, I'm looking for someone who can drive our van, who can take me to ceramic lessons. I'm looking for a creative person who can help me, make amazing ceramics, and, put some of your personality out there and enthusiasm, because you want to attract someone who has enthusiasm. So you've got to put some out there. So, without going overboard and, putting 10,000 words in your job description, try and make it concise, but also interesting, really, and showing a bit of personality.
I think as you say, putting that enthusiasm out there invites enthusiasm.
Absolutely, you get it back.
We see some great posts come through. We see things like a water aerobics enthusiast. We see fellow Harry Styles lover. We see all sorts of wonderful creative things coming through, and you do notice that those job posts are the ones with the most interest, because as you say, people are sharing their personality, and so they're getting the right types of workers in response, which is wonderful. Mel, did you have anything to add to the job posting piece?
I think a lot of it Pam and Pat has covered in terms of being enthusiastic, and I think when I post a job up, I sort of know the kind of support workers that I want to work for, in terms of, I usually work more with allied health students. So I sometimes tailor the job ads more towards them, in terms of, for example, if it's an OT student that I want to work with, I kind of tailor it more so the support workers feel like they're not just helping out as a support worker, but they're also learning and experience in terms of their career and their studies. So just add a little dance into, like, for example, for an OT student, you might also mean if you come on board, you'll be introduced to a whole different range of assistive tech. And we all know for OT lovers, assistive tech.
Yes, very attractive. And so it's about highlighting the opportunities that the shift could present to the support worker as well.
It's a two-way street.
It's a two-way street. Both parties are sort of benefiting from that relationship. And I think, as you say, it allows you to be really specific about the types of people that you might want as well. And often we get questions around, how do I filter for an OT student or someone who loves crafts or someone who, loves the St George Dragons or whatever it might be. The jobs board, and whilst we can't, possibly have all of the filter options in the world, the jobs board does allow you to be really specific and say, this is what I'm looking for. This is the type of person that, would be best for this shift. Yeah, absolutely. I guess the other way that people can connect then is through the messaging feature, and this was what we had originally, and probably Pam, when you started, this is all that we had.
Yeah.
And I know that it's something that you and Bree have engaged in quite a lot, and it, for those of you who aren't familiar, it allows you to be able to search for workers in your area and filter based on certain criteria, and then from there send a direct message to the workers that you think would be of interest. So with that in mind, Pam, obviously thinking back to some of the messages that you have sent to workers in the past, what questions do you like to ask in that initial message?
Well, once again, it depends on what we're looking for at the time. At times, Brianna's wish was for someone around her age group to support her in social activities on weekends. So age was one of the criteria. An ability to drive our van in certain instances was important, depending on what activity, how far away it was, how much driving was going to be involved in a particular day. It's really hard to get a personality through that messaging system, and that's what we found. It kind of didn't have or it didn't give us as much of that human element, but obviously that's the way it started out, and that's what we did use. So after a few backwards and forwards questions both sides, we would generally proceed. I would give my phone number so we could have a group chat, and sort of further that, sort of knowledge base for all of us. And then we'd arrange either a meet and greet or just a short, sort of, booking, just to see how that went, because obviously that personal rapport is really important for everybody, I guess.
For both sides.
Particularly if you're looking for someone on a weekly basis to spend 7 hours, as we do on 2 days with Bree. So that was all. It just took a little bit longer. That's all. Messaging backwards and forwards. Then if you can put it all up, most of the information up on the job board, then people know, for example, you're looking for someone every Wednesday, it's going to be a regular job, it's going to be certain hours, pretty much fixed. So there are certain things that straight away people can either eliminate or tick the boxes and go further into it. So
it just gives you a more a smaller pool of people to say all of these people meet the criteria, and now I can start to get a sense of as to whether they'd be the right fit for me. And for you, Pat, I know that for a lot of people, reaching out to a support worker can be a little bit scary, and they're not really sure what to say or how to present themselves, or as Pam said, how much information to share. How do I let my personality shine through in this message? So being on the receiving end of messages, what would you encourage people seeking support to convey in that initial message to a support worker?
I think I would almost go one further and not just say this is something I think is important for someone seeking support or a client to maybe write in their first message to a support worker, but also if a support worker is approaching a client and asking, I'd love to work with you. I think it's important to, and this comes back to compatibility again. I love when someone seeking support has actually messaged me and said, I can see you're, really into your sport, or, and they've actually, it shows me that they've actually read through my bio and actually are kind of reaching out to me because they think that I'd be able to assist them in, XYZ areas. And then that kind of makes me feel like, cool. So they actually reach out. I mean, it's kind of, it sounds a bit, so obsessed, but it's like, they actually want me to come work with them. So it's a nice feeling. And then likewise, if I'm going to message someone that I think, yeah, like I'd love to work with this person, I sort of, because of their bio and that sort of thing, that's the first thing that I start with. And then and again, touching on what you said, it is quite hard to get that human element through the messages. So it's quite nice to kind of have that kind of understanding straight off the bat of, oh, you're into this and so am I. Here's my mobile number, or, like, let's have a meet and greet. And then that's where you sort of chat a bit more and get to know each other a bit more and chat about support requirements and what's, exactly. Yeah. So I think that's definitely just teeing up straight away with, showing some interest in that specific person is really important.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great tip to sort of reference something in that person's profile that shows that you actually have engaged and read and you're invested in, trying to start a support relationship with them. I think that's a really, really great tip. It's been mentioned a couple of times now, this idea of a meet and greet, and it's something that we encourage here at Hireup, of course. But once people have connected, there's obviously the opportunity then to do sort of a voluntary, 30 minutes or so, just at a cafe or at your home or wherever people feel most comfortable. And I guess, as you were saying, Pam, it's an opportunity then to just get a sense as to whether there is a rapport. And of course, there's no obligation after that point for people to work together, but it's just a nice opportunity to get a sense as to whether it would be the right fit. And I guess a question for you, Mel, is that having, such a big team and obviously always kind of recruiting and inducting new support workers, that could be a relatively time-consuming process. So do you have any tips for people in how to make a meet and greet really efficient, and what sort of things you like to cover in that session?
Yeah, it's funny because I started off doing meet and greets in person. Yeah. Whether it's just at a local library or a cafe, not library, but it's just close to cafe.
Well, you can go to a library.
What's wrong with the library?
Yes, I started off doing it in person, but just because of the nature of my schedule, juggling between 2 jobs and uni, it was quite time consuming. Yeah. So I've started to do a lot more video calls. Great. Whether it was via Skype or FaceTime or
Well, that idea. That's so efficient. Let's just line up a series of video calls.
I set the day aside and I book everyone half an hour in between each one, and then I just go through all the calls.
That's great.
So good.
Yeah, I think it serves the same purpose in terms of I'm still able to cover everything that I want to cover. Yeah. And usually it just involves the support worker telling me about themselves and just for us to get to know each other. And like I said, just having an icebreaker of just, what are you doing? What are you studying? I'm doing this too. I like that too. And then going into a bit more granular in terms of these are the support areas I'm looking for, and but depending on the experience, either they are familiar with it or if not, I'll just spend a little bit more time chatting them through the process. Yep. Essentially, it's just like a quick call just to go through kind of what to expect as a support worker to be on the team. Yep. That kind of stuff that I'll be doing, and then I follow up with an induction email. Yep. More like a summary of what we just spoke about in the chat. Yep. But just so they have it for the reference in terms of, probably sounds like there's a lot when I talk. So it's just good for the workers to have a reference to and go back to every time.
Fantastic. Sounds like you've got a very good process in place
So
there.
efficient.
I like it. It's actually funny, we had a Q&A session in here last week. I think maybe you were involved as well, and one of the support workers mentioned that she thought it would be a good idea for people to be able to post a video of themselves. So as opposed to just having a profile with written information, to be able to share a video
bio.
A video bio, which I think is a really awesome idea. So
Get tech onto that.
And I know that you and Bree always do, or I believe you always do meet and greets with the support workers that you've engaged with. Is that right?
Not always, no. We've done it with more recently. But some people we've had such a rapport on with a group chat that we've said, okay, come next Thursday or whatever. And I'll sort of be there for the first hour and all being well, you know, we'll just play it by ear and see how it goes. And obviously that's it's a very personal thing, because you get a feeling when you speak with someone, and I suppose it's like a meet and greet, because if the first hour goes terribly wrong,
Like a dog.
sorry, I think we might have to but that hasn't happened. Because I think in those instances we've had quite long chats and got a really good vibe from the person involved. So I mean, it can work either way, really. I think what you're comfortable with, different people have different levels of comfort that they can work with, and some people, you know, are definitely more control freaks and want to, you know, control the process every step of the way. So I think, you know, for us it's worked both ways.
Fantastic.
But I love Mel's idea about the video
it's a
chat. I'll be
fantastic
using that in
idea.
future. Absolutely.
I was going to say I love Pam's concept of group chat, because it's surprising how much you can tell. You can just learn from a person just by chatting to them. Like with my team, I have two separate social platforms in terms of, we have a team Snapchat where it's just everyday
So good.
fun stuff.
Love it.
And then we have a team email where all the bit more formal
stuff
commonplace, and then we have the individual chat.
That's fantastic. So it's just a way for you all to stay really connected and for your team to stay connected.
Exactly. And it's not just being connected to me, but also with each other.
With one another,
Yeah, and it's great to see some of the people on my team start to do outings on their own, go out to different, make new friends.
Well, we might come back to that, because I have a question at the end around how you sort of keep all of your support workers engaged and connected with one another. But I quickly wanted to ask Pat just to share a story. You were mentioning before we started tonight's session that you had gone along to a meet and greet, sort of being polite, thinking, oh, this probably won't work out, but it had a very different ending.
Yeah, so I'm a big advocate for meet and greets after this. So I actually this was my first time on the platform, and I was sort of scrolling through, and I think I must have scrolling through the job board, I must have hit interested on one of the jobs, and got this really enthusiastic message from someone, and I was like, oh, okay, well, yeah, let's see, this looks great. Message back, like, yeah, okay, that sounds great. We'll meet up. That's very enthusiastic. And this is why I always look at the profiles now. And I saw that they actually live on the northern beaches, and I'm a fair way from the northern beaches. So I was like, okay, it's going to be interesting to fit around uni and all this. So instantly a bunch of things were going off in my head, and I was like, you know what, just put that aside. Like, let's just go and meet them and have a chat, and have a bit of a yarn before you make up your mind. And I got there and ended up staying for an hour and a half and having the best chat with this guy that was seeking support, his sister and his mum, and just, you know, and we still work together today. So they were the first person that I supported on the platform, and still do, and we've become very close. And
what's the best shift you've done together?
We've done a few really good ones. I think the most random one that we went to, and probably the best, was the rodeo in Sydney. I'd never the first thing from a country boy, and going to see that was an experience in itself.
So good. Mel, I wanted to touch on earlier, but we kind of got on to chatting about meet and greets. But one of the other ways, of course, that people can utilise Hireup is by bringing on board their own supports. And I know that because you got on board with Hireup in early days, there wasn't, you know, necessarily the network of supports already on the platform for you to choose from. So you have been incredibly proactive in recruiting your own supports. Can you kind of share some of the ways that you've gone about that and some of the learnings?
Yeah, so I think I was quite lucky because I had two, revenues of recruitment, like as you said, on the Hireup user, but also if I didn't find the right people that I was looking for on the Hireup platform, I would recruit externally through university career hubs with UTS, Western Sydney, University of Sydney, and a couple of others. And that's quite a fun process in terms of I kind of get to write up a whole job ad.
Yep.
And tailoring that to whoever I want to target it to, which is usually allied health students. But I think the fun part is when I actually do the interview with them, I get to introduce them to Hireup, and I had to see their facial expressions when they're just mind blown. That things actually exist. That's like my highlight of all the interviews. But yes, with that method, it just takes a little bit more time in terms of putting the job up, waiting for someone to respond, and then interviewing them, and then waiting for them to sign up onto Hireup and to onboard into the platform. Takes a bit of additional time, whereas if I can just get someone on the platform already, that cuts out a fair bit of time.
Yeah.
And I think I've also learned over time you have to time it right to post to job boards. There was one time when I posted it during the exam period and got 0 responses, and I was wondering why. Genius. Yeah, everybody loves me.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. Something to consider.
Yeah.
Timing.
Nice.
And I think a lot of people are starting to think about people within their existing networks as well that they could, potentially get on board. And I know that Pam, Brianna and I knew one another before Hireup, and then we both found ourselves on Hireup. So we kind of had an existing relationship, and then we were just able to use Hireup, to book the shifts in that we wanted to work together. So
That's right.
I guess that's definitely an idea for people, is to think about who is already in your network, where could you potentially find people and then get them on board to work with you.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's a great networking tool for everybody, for the support workers and for the clients as well.
Yeah, and I do find, I think increasingly that people are referring people. So,
Yes.
I know that Pat will say, look, I'm not available, but I've got a friend who's on Hireup, and, they could potentially. And that word of mouth, I think, just sort of instant trust that the person's going to be, right for you as well.
And I think that's so at the core of what Hireup is. It's just so good to kind of have this set up where you are constantly kind of facilitating this community, and as it grows, like, those connections are so important, and it's just so good that everyone's kind of operating like that, and it's good to know to operate like that.
Yeah, I just, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it's quite funny. It's amazing how small the world is in terms of you don't realize that support workers know each other until like the new support worker that I just hired yesterday. I just realized she's actually one of my assistant worker's best friends.
Oh,
That's ideal.
As I was explaining to her the logistics of the shifts and what happens, and she was like, "That sounds really familiar. I heard my best friend talk about it."
Small world.
Add it to the Snapchat channel.
So good. So I guess we've talked about meet and greets, and Pam, you were talking about earlier, doing then almost like a buddy shift or a training shift or that kind of thing. And I think those on-shift inductions are really important in terms of setting the expectations and making sure that both sides knows exactly, what to expect from that shift, and that people have the right skills and have the right information to provide, really effective and healthy support. So Pat, a question for you then is, in that first shift, and maybe thinking back to the gentleman that you were just talking about, what is really important information for you to know on that first shift?
I think it's first and foremost, it's so important just to, like, the biggest thing I've learned is just to openly communicate about anything. If you're not comfortable with something, if you're not sure of something, just ask, because people are always willing to share. I'm sure you'd be the same, share that information, because it's peace of mind for them as well, that you're going to be the best possible support for them. And so I guess on that first shift, there was things like manual handling and toileting and personal care and things like that. And it really did help to have a buddy shift, so I could kind of, watch what was happening, as well as then also get my hands on and help. And it was like a kind of team process where, like, I was chatting with not only the support worker that had been there for 10 odd years, but also chatting to the gentleman that I was supporting, and we're all communicating with each other to make sure that, I was learning most effectively and supporting him properly. So I think definitely buddy shift is huge, and if not, just making sure you're asking those questions if you're unsure of something, and making sure that you not stay in your comfort zone the whole time, because you should try and reach out of your comfort zone a little bit at times, but never too much that you're unsure of something.
And I think it's really key. I think sometimes people are scared to ask questions because they don't want to come across as incompetent or not knowing or whatever the case may be. But a lot of the time, there's so much information that families or individuals just don't think to communicate because there's so much
because
going
it's
on.
ingrained.
It's ingrained in your everyday.
It's just automatic behaviour that you may not even recognise that you do.
Exactly.
And you don't necessarily even know that you need to articulate it until, somebody either watches you or asks the question themselves. So, that's a really important point.
And Pam, do you have any, anything that any sort of guides or checklists or anything like that you sort of like to go through with support workers before they get started working with Brianna?
I mean, there's a mental checklist, I guess. And this is a bit of the control freak in me being the mother, but I always like to have a look at the ID, because when you're talking to someone online, you don't have their last name. So I always like to make sure the ID actually matches the carer who comes.
Absolutely.
And I know Hireup does their checklists as well, but for my peace of mind, I always that is the first thing I ask for, either a license or an ID.
I think that's fantastic, as you say, to give you peace of mind that the right person is there.
Obviously the routines, the personal care, the manual handling, all those sort of aspects are just par for the course, obviously, because they are needed in the shift, however long it is. I think also in Bree's case, her speech can be quite dystaphic, which is a hard word to say.
That is a hard word.
So at times, particularly if she's tired, her words run together, and it can be very difficult to understand if you're not used to it. So being confident with someone who will ask questions or will try to get the information out of her, speaking to someone who, if they don't understand Bree, will find other ways to communicate. Bree has, the phone, obviously, and apps and things like that, but also someone who's not afraid to say, well, if I don't understand her, if, for example, she can't, sort of communicate with her app. If it's not working, what do I do? Or just ring me or message me, or someone who's thinking ahead to, maybe a point where the wheels might come off temporarily. So once again, it's a two-way street that, somebody, will recognise, that, there may be times that they need, something that they can't get, how to get across that. So the emergency sort of factor.
Foresight.
And I think, having sort of as much information as people can in that support plan is really key in a support worker, just getting a base understanding before they go into the shift, what questions to ask, understanding, okay, I can see that there might be some challenges with speech, I can see that, there might be some, mobility or manual handling. So for a support worker, I guess it's their responsibility to have a read through of that support plan, pick up on any red flags, so that when they go into that first shift, they know what sort of questions to ask, and together, both parties can go through that and make sure that everything's being covered.
For sure. And I think that does, that's definitely a good point that kind of links back to that. The process on your first couple of shifts even is kind of like, it's important to have that teamwork process where you've read through the support plan and got your head around a little bit, but then you might need that assistance, and you kind of work through it together with the person that's seeking support, or a family member, or a buddy shift with a support worker.
I think the hard thing about it is also having the ability to be flexible in terms of acknowledging that each support worker will have different ways of receiving information. I mean, some support workers may prefer to read up on as much as you can before attending a shift, versus a support worker that might be a bit more practical and prefer to be taught in a show and tell method. Probably that's what I find with my one, because with my support needs look much more complicated on paper.
Yep.
So I try to keep everything as detailed as possible, but also not enough to, I guess, intimidate people.
Yeah.
And I kind of, when I go through the induction process, I take them through the process so the support worker feels confident enough in knowing that what they want to walk into. And then, as Kat was saying, a lot more of the training on shift and just pairing the new person up with a person who's been more experienced.
Yeah.
And having the ability to show them and to let them work on at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, that buddy shift, whether it be with a family member or another support worker. Yeah, absolutely. And before we wrap up with some tips from each of you, Mel, I'd love for you to just share quickly the types of activities that you do with your support workers, because it's like a social club. It's something that I want to be a part of. I want to be a part of it. Just some of the things that you guys do together, because it's fantastic.
So I guess first I started off testing out the theory that I had in my head around, just started off with quarterly feedback sessions.
Yeah.
And it's just a quick form that I put together, and I a couple of questions around how do they find the shifts, and if there's anything that I can do to better support them in order for them to support me, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then I added the element of just quarterly night outs for the team.
So good.
Excellent.
So quarterly night out.
Excellent.
I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, we've done a couple so far. We've been to a concert. We've been out for dinner for a couple of drinks.
It's so good.
Typical young people.
That's so good.
And Mel, what do you think the benefits are in connecting and introducing your support workers to one another?
I think the most important thing is for everyone to actually spend time together. I mean, everyone will work with each other, but not as a whole team. So it's good for each person on the team to either meet new people who have just started, and for the new people to just, I guess, get used to the team culture. But also, for them to just start forming a friendship outside of work. And for me also to interact with my support workers, not just on a professional level, but also on a more personal level, where it's just a bunch of girls that want to go for a nice trip for a nice dinner.
Sounds like it gets a bit wild. I think it gets a bit wild. Well, we might wrap up with just a quick top tip from each of you. So I guess thinking about people who haven't yet gotten started with Hireup, people who might be a little bit nervous about reaching out to support workers, what would you say to them? What would be one thing you'd say to them?
I think, just reiterating kind of the tone of what I've tried to say, just really sell your personality. And I know it's kind of up there in the brand of Hireup is, you do you, but it's corny, but it's so true. Like, being a great support worker with Hireup is about making connections in the community, about really that compatibility with people, and making it is a kind of blurred line. We were chatting about this before, between a work relationship and a really good friendship, and that's why it's such a sustainable kind of way of doing things, because you become friends. So really, in that bio, talk about yourself. Don't worry about sounding self-gratifying. Talk about yourself, and then and in the message, put yourself out there, and in the messages, really connect with people on the mutual interests you have, and that's the thing. So just really embrace who you are. Just a lesson for life more than anything.
That is We'll get that on the wall.
Top tip. I think for me, it's use a job board. The job board is a fantastic way of concisely telling people what you need as a client, what you're looking for, and once again put a bit of personality into it. But that's a way of sort of getting the most out of the people, sorting out the big fish from the little fish. So I think that's for me, that's been the most efficient way of using it sort of as a client.
Fantastic. I'm very pro the job board.
Definitely.
Job board. I think That's great. And Mel?
I don't know exactly what Pen and Pat just said in terms of just, I think, being authentic and being transparent.
Yeah.
In terms of be yourself, you don't have to pretend to be someone who you're not, or just be open about sharing what you need and what you're looking for, but also just don't feel like you need to hold back.
Yeah.
Because it's on a platform.
Yeah.
Because when you're on the platform, you already have the mindset of knowing that everyone who's on the platform is here for the same reason. So there's no need for you to but just be transparent and be extremely open and just be prepared to make amazing connections.
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
What a nice way to finish.
And I guess I had one more tip.
Oh, sorry.
I have one tip on behalf of the Hireup team for people just to reach out to us and to reach out to us here at HQ, or to reach out to your representatives in the community and ask questions. And we're here to help people connect. We're here to help you write your bio. We're here to help in the event that there's an incident or a concern or anything like that. So I guess my top tip is to use us and to reach out to us. And to connect with us, because we love to hear from everyone in the community. So thank you so much for being a part of tonight's session. I really enjoyed it, and I think that everybody got a lot out of it. So we will be tuning in again next month. Next month's session is around autism and behaviour, and we're really excited to have some special guests joining us for that. We'll be sharing this video as well. Of course, it's going live on Facebook, but we'll be sharing a captioned version of it as well. So keep tuned for all of the updates and everything happening on Facebook, and have a wonderful night. Thank you.